Good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm in my outdoor office with a second cup of coffee in my Carolina mug. Obviously, I am recording this earlier. I'm tied up next week on Wednesday, not able to do it live on Facebook, but I recorded it, and hopefully you are watching, and your Wednesday will be great. Over the next good bit of time, I'm going to be on Wednesday mornings just doing, taking some time to give like a bare bones sketch of the various portions of the Bible. Eventually, what I'll have is a series of short introductions to each book of the Bible that will go up on my own personal website. That's preacher-dan.square.site. There's none of them up there yet, but hopefully over the next few weeks they will start showing up there. I don't want to spend Wednesday mornings for 66 weeks doing introductions to books of the Bible. That'd take too long. But I think I will, over the next little while, give short synopses, introductions to smaller chunks. So for today, I'll be referring to the Pentateuch. Begin with the beginning. Now, the Pentateuch is the first 5 books of the Bible. It is sort of synonymous with the term Torah. The Torah is the law, and you might say that the Torah is contained in the Pentateuch, but they're almost synonymous terms. We're talking about the first 5 books of the Bible, and before I tell you what they are, what are they? Try to recall the first 5 books if you can. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And some of these books are ones that we don't normally read from a lot. Genesis, we think of a lot, but how many sermons have you heard from Leviticus recently? Numbers and Leviticus we don't see a whole lot of. So we're talking about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. The Genesis through Deuteronomy. In just the barest bones sketch of the content of each. Genesis is the book of origins. It's the book of origins. Origins of the earth, the universe by extension. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we have in Genesis, the first 10 chapters, 11 chapters are primordial history, primeval history. It's a story of origins, but it's so far back that it's impossible to assign numeric dating. And particularly in the case of the creation accounts in Genesis 1 and 2, to try to assign dating for that, ever how many years ago, sort of misses the point anyway. And the rest of Genesis is the origins of the Hebrew people. So origins of the earth and humanity in the first 11 chapters, and then 12 through the end of the book is the origins of the Hebrew people. They called Abraham, and then the story of Isaac, and eventually you get to Joseph. Exodus picks up where Genesis left off. Exodus, we have the account of the deliverance of the Hebrew people, the Israelites, from bondage in Egypt. In Exodus, we find out how they end up in bondage, and we have the story of their deliverance from bondage. And Exodus ends with the glory of God filling the tabernacle. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Leviticus is sort of the natural follow-on to Exodus. It is primarily regulations and laws. And regulations for the various holy days in the Hebrew faith. There are set feast days and holy days that they were to observe, and Genesis and Leviticus gives all of the regulations for those. For the various types of offerings. It has a lot of laws, both ritual and ceremonial laws, as well as ethical laws. In particular, in Leviticus, there is a section there from chapter 17 through 26 that is important. It's called the Holiness Code. And the Holiness Code is like 10 chapters of ethics, of how to live, how to treat your neighbor, sexual ethics, how to treat the poor. Is powerful. It is probably the most important part of the book of Leviticus, and is an underappreciated but very important part of the Old Testament. These 10 chapters that are just ethics. How do we live? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, where Leviticus is primarily regulations and laws. Numbers is the story of the journey of the people of Israel from Mount Sinai / Horeb. And by the way, it's the same mountain referred to by two different names. Thus, the Numbers is the the journey of the people from Mount Sinai to the edge of the Promised Land. And in Numbers, you have repeated instances of unbelief. The people grumbling, the people griping, the people doing the wrong thing. And at the end of Numbers, you have commands and instructions about how the people are to enter and settle the land. And then Deuteronomy. And Deuteronomy is all about Deuteronomy is all about the Mosaic covenant. And the covenant that God gave to Moses. And Deuteronomy, in a way, provides the lens through which we read a lot of the Old Testament. When you read Deuteronomy, and when you get that, you can get the lens through which we should read Samuel and Kings. In the very ancient world, there were sort of the set forms for treaties and covenants, and Deuteronomy follows that. So in Deuteronomy, we read of the covenant, and the covenant has, when you read it, you see there are blessings that follow from obedience. If you'll obey the covenant that I give you, if you'll obey my commands, if you'll follow me, says the Lord, here are all the blessings. And the counterpart, if you do not obey, if you do not follow the covenant, here are the curses that will follow. And that comprises the book of Deuteronomy. And like I mentioned, if you, you read Deuteronomy and get it, then you have the lens through which to read 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. So, who wrote the Pentateuch? The short answer, who knows? By tradition, the Pentateuch is ascribed to Moses. In the New Testament, they'll sometimes might say, so Jesus might be quoted as saying, what did Moses say? Referring to one of the books of the Pentateuch. So you have this ancient tradition that Moses wrote the Pentateuch. It's doubtful. It is quite doubtful now that Moses actually sat down and wrote all 5 books of the Pentateuch. I suspect that they might go that the Pentateuch might have its origins with him, but I also think that they were some good period of time in the final editing. Over the last couple hundred years, there has been a trend in scholarly circles to sort of theorize there being 4 different writers for the Pentateuch. J, E, D, and P, they're called, to get technical about it. And when you read and to pick, this portion of this book is from the J source, and this portion of this other book is from the E source, etc. I think that gets really complicated and needlessly complicated. And my own thinking is that the books may have originated with Moses, and then over a long period of time were edited into the form that we have. As far as dating, assuming that the books at least have an origin with Moses, assuming that, and like I said, that's far from a guarantee, assuming they have at least an origin with Moses, that we can at least have a somewhat approximate dating. The Exodus gets dated to somewhere between 1250 and 1450 BC. There's like 2 really, the dating of the Exodus is really hotly debated. There's an earlier date that some people support that's in the 1400s BC. Others support a later date that's sort of in the mid-1200s BC. So if we can nail Moses down in that time frame, then that gives us at least a picture for when the books might have originated. So those are the books that comprise the Pentateuch, with like a 30-second thumbnail sketch of each one. And the authorship and the dating. The last thing, the purpose. The Pentateuch, the Torah, these are the most sacred portion of the Hebrew Scriptures. In the Hebrew Scriptures, the Torah, the Pentateuch, are the most holy. They're the most sacred. Certainly the prophets are important. The writings, particularly the Psalms, are important, and there are some Psalms that are critical in interpreting parts of the New Testament, but in Jewish life and practice, in the ancient world and now, the Pentateuch is the most important. This is a story of their origins and the origins of their covenant with the Almighty. So I hope that has been a helpful little thumbnail sketch for the origins of the Pentateuch. One thing that I will mention, for right now, up through the election, I'm not doing anything on Facebook except for what I'm doing with the churches. So I won't be checking comments or anything If you watch and comment on YouTube, I am checking that regularly and will correspond with you regularly there. But I hope this has been helpful, and have a great Wednesday.